Well, good morning again. You're not done with me quite yet this morning. Randy is out serving and helping one of our sister churches, Deerfoot, in Trussville, which is where I was last week. So it's possible that he's cleaning up messes I made last week. But I am grateful to be here and to continue in worship this morning as we look into God's Word together. So if you will take your copy of God's Word and turn to Genesis chapter 27. That's where we're going to be this morning. It's a long chapter, and there's lots in it. We'll only scratch the surface of it. We're going to look specifically verses 1 through 35. We're not going to read all of it, and to save us a little bit of time, I'm just going to read parts of it as we get to it, and not read beforehand. But of course, we're in a series on Jacob and on the life of Jacob. And when you think about the life of Jacob, of course, Randy mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, it can lead to a little bit of confusion because you watch this guy, and there are times in which you see his actions, and we'll see some of that today, where you go, what in the world are you doing? Why would you be the way that you are? But also what we see in the life of Jacob is the fulfillment of the promise of God, and that God keeps his promises. We sang about it just now. The name that is undefeated. And that's what we can think about. That's what we should think about. What I want us to see this morning from Genesis chapter 27 is this, to see God's prevailing grace. But I want to do this before we jump into Genesis chapter 27. I want to back up just a little bit and read a few verses that Randy read for us a couple of weeks ago that will help kind of lay the foundation or set the stage for what we're going to look at today. Because what we're going to look at today is absolutely scandalous. But look, let me read Genesis 25, verses 21 through 23, and then verse 27. Because we start off okay. It says, and Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren. That's good, right? It's how things ought to be when needs arise, when trouble comes. Where do we go first? We go to the Lord. That's what Isaac does here. And the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. But listen, it says, the children struggled together within her, and she said, if it is thus, why is this happening to me? So she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The older shall serve the younger. So this is God declaring something that will happen. Now, time passes. And then look at verse 27. It says, when the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man dwelling in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Do you see that? Do you see the problem there? We start off so well, right? Isaac prays for his wife because she was barren. The Lord answers. She becomes pregnant with twins, and then God declares what's going to happen. Ultimately, that Jacob will be the one through whom the blessing flows, through whom the promise is fulfilled. But what we see later on down the line, verse 27 and 28, we see who Esau was. He was a man of the field. Jacob was a quiet man. And then verse 28 says, Isaac loved Esau. But do you see what it says about this? Because he ate of his game. I mean, what kind of horrible love is that? That is not a fatherly love that says, I love you because you are my son. No, it's I love you because of what you can do for me. I love the deer meat, and you bring it, so I love you. And it says that Rebekah loved Jacob. I mean, listen, we don't have to dig deep to see that this is a dysfunctional family at this point. That this is a mess. So now, we see that. That's the backdrop. So let's get to chapter 27. And as we look at this chapter, I want to answer this question first. What do we not see? What do we not see? We'll get into the things that we do see, but what do we not see in chapter 27? The first thing that we don't see, and this is plainly obvious to us, we don't see a united family. We already know that by reading chapter 5, verse 28, that Isaac loved Esau, Rebekah loved Jacob. But we don't see a united family. All four members of this family, they're never, in this chapter, they're never in the same place at the same time, headed in the same direction. They're not. We'll see Isaac and Esau together. We'll see Rebekah with Jacob. We'll see Isaac with Jacob. And we'll see Isaac with Esau again. But never in the same place at the same time, doing the same thing. The second thing that we won't see, that you don't see in chapter 27, is interaction with God. It's interesting because in chapters 25 and 26, there are three separate occasions when the Lord speaks directly, either to Isaac or Rebekah. And it's clear to everyone around them that there's something different about this family. By chapter 27, that's all gone. That's all gone. And as we'll find out, as we'll see in this, it doesn't mean that God is inactive. It doesn't mean that his plans are derailed, but it does mean that this family has distanced themselves from God, and they aren't living in obedience to him. So we don't see a united family. We don't see interaction with God among the members of this family, but here's what we do see. As we look at this, we'll see this in four, this is like a drama, okay? It's like a play, and it's four major scenes. Scenes of fighting, scheming, plotting, deception, and ultimate defeat. And what we'll see out of this disaster of a situation is that God's purposes and promises ultimately prevail. And that's good news for you and me today. In the midst of looking at this tragedy of a family. Because, listen, we need to know that in this world of sin, where so much seems disordered, where evil appears to win the day, that God is, according to Ephesians 1, working out all things according to the counsel of his will. And that, as Romans 8:28 famously says, working all things for good to those who love him and have been called according to his purpose. And that's what we so desperately need to see in this chapter that is awful. But four scenes that we'll see. And the first one that we see is this. This is verses 1 through 4. The first scene of this drama among this family is this. Isaac schemes against God. Isaac schemes against God. Read these verses with me, just verses 1 through 4. It says, when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim so that he could not see, he called Esau, his older son, and said to him, my son. And he answered, here I am. He said, behold, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver, and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and prepare for me delicious food, such as I love, and bring it to me so that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die. Now, did you notice in there that Isaac tells us what he really loves? Bring me some meat that I love. Bring it to me. And Isaac says, hey, I'm getting old. I don't know the day of my death. But he's plotting something in secret right here. He's plotting the blessing. He wants to bless Esau because he loves Esau more than he loves Jacob. So I want to answer this question. What is the blessing? What is the blessing that we're talking about here? This would be a family blessing, an inheritance of sorts. And it has some element of material benefit, but there's also a reference to something that is spiritual, something that is deeper, something of the desires of the Father. It's a statement that characterizes, in a way, the recipient of the blessing. It tells us something of who he is, of who he will be. And in most cases, the firstborn in a family was the recipient of the blessing. Specifically, the firstborn male was the recipient of the blessing. And in large part, this was to ensure the continuation of the family line. So he would receive the lion's share of the inheritance and of the blessing. But here's another note about the blessings that would take place in this particular time. It would typically be done in a family setting with all of the family present. It wouldn't be done in secrecy like they're doing right now. That Isaac would plan it this way tells us something about the whole situation, about the family dynamic, and about Isaac's spiritual state at this time. Because we already know, don't we, what God has said. That the older will serve the younger, that the younger will be the one to receive the blessing. We already know this. We've been told this. God has said this. So do you see what I'm saying? When I'm talking here about Isaac scheming against God, it's God who declared that Jacob would receive the blessing. And now Isaac is standing here taking matters into his own hands, saying, I'm going to do things my way. It's interesting because when you think about Isaac, he is the son of promise. He's called the son of promise. Technically speaking, he is Abraham's second son. And yet he says, no, I'm going to make sure that this line proceeds through my firstborn son. Isaac, like so many of us do from time to time, decided that he knew better than God. He took matters into his own hands and said, I'm going to do this my way. And so what does he do? He tells Esau to hunt game, cook it up so that he could bless Esau before he died. Isaac is fighting against the will and the purpose of God and against God himself. It's tragic. It's not the way that it should be. But he's not the only one with sinister plans. Our second scene in verses 5 through 17 is this. Rebekah schemes against Isaac. Isaac schemes against God. His wife, Rebekah, schemes against him. Verse 5, listen to this. Now Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to his son Esau. How about that? She's like hiding around the corner, eavesdropping on this conversation. So when Esau went to the field to hunt for game and bring it, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, I heard your father speak to your brother Esau. Bring me game and prepare for me delicious food that I may eat it and bless you before the Lord before I die. And so Rebekah says to Jacob in verse 8, Now therefore, my son, obey my voice as I command you. Go to the flock, bring me 2 good young goats, so that I may prepare from them delicious food for your father, such as he loves, and you shall bring it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies. Now this is amazing right here, because Rebekah goes, hey, if the two of us scheme, if we get together, then the two of us can essentially become one Esau, and then you can get the blessing. Because remember, Rebekah loved Jacob. And right here, in the rest of this passage, Jacob doesn't outright object to the plan, but he does start to recognize 2 key issues. Esau is hairy, and Jacob is not. He goes, what if he fills my hands and my arms? He's going to realize that I'm not Esau, but that I'm actually Jacob. And then he says, if he feels me and he realizes that I'm trying to deceive him, he curses me. Rebekah says, hey, don't worry about all that. Any curse that comes to you, let it be on me. That's what she says. I mean, how bold would that be? First of all, we don't even know if it's possible for her to do that. That the curse would be the curse, and she can't just take it away from Jacob. But she says, look, you just obey me. You just do what I tell you to do. And so he does. He brings in 2 young goats. Rebekah prepares them for Isaac. Jacob dresses up in Esau's best clothes. They use the hairy skin of the goat to put on Jacob's hands and neck. No part of that goat goes unused in this situation. Do you see how sad, though, this whole situation is? There's so much estrangement. And a lot of scholars believe that Rebekah and Isaac weren't even talking at this point. That their relationship was just one of a formality at this point. So much estrangement, though, in this family that you have a father and a son and a mother and another son plotting against each other. And even though, technically speaking, Rebekah is aiming for the right son to receive the blessing, she's using worldly means to get there. She's not trusting God to keep his promise. You ever talk to the TV when you're watching a show and you're trying to help out the characters? And you're like, don't go there, don't go in that room. He's under the bed. We talk to the TV. I mean, we're getting the vantage point of being able to look in on this passage right here, and we could scream out with all of our might, like, don't do it. There's another way. There's a better way. And I want you to think about this. How would you advise or counsel Rebekah if you could talk to her? You could say, Rebekah, what has God promised? What did he say? What did he say? Do you believe him? Do you believe what he said? That the older would serve the younger, that Jacob would be the one to receive the blessing? If you believe that, then why are you taking such an awful, sinful approach to this? Rebekah, wait on God. Rest in him. Trust in him. You've seen his faithfulness in the past. You've seen him keep his promises in the past. He'll do it again. Don't do this your own way. It's not worth it. Because, brothers and sisters, we've never been given the freedom to sin in order to achieve God's purposes. Never, ever. And that's what she's doing here. And it's just incredible and incredibly sad, because what we have here is the opposite of what we might think we'd expect of a family led by the one who had been labeled the son of promise. We have not a testimony of faithfulness and walking in obedience to the Lord, but a testimony of dysfunction and tragedy, and doing it essentially the exact opposite of the way that it should be done. This is Rebekah scheming now against her own husband, Isaac. In our third scene, verses 18 through 29, Jacob deceives Isaac. Now we reach the point in the story, in the narrative, where you could cut the tension with a knife. Verse 18 tells us this. So he went in to his father and said, "My father." And he said, "Here I am. Who are you, my son?" He hears a voice, doesn't he? He doesn't know whose it is. Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Now sit up and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me." But Isaac said to his son, "How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son?" He answered, "Because the Lord your God granted me success." Now just stop. Jacob invokes the name of God here. And what he does is he takes the Lord's name in vain. He's misusing the Lord's name. He is lying right now. You see, because if Jacob comes in and he simply says, "Well, I took the first shot, I hit what I needed to hit, and, got it all ready in time," Isaac could be suspicious of that. But who in the world, when he says, "God gave me success," what's Isaac going to say? No, he didn't. This is what we call sometimes today Jesus juking somebody, where you over-spiritualize something in order to win an argument so that you just shut everybody up, so that nobody can say anything in objection to what you're saying. He says, "God gave me success." What you going to do with that? You going to argue with that? But then Isaac said to Jacob, "Please come near, that I may feel you, my son, to know whether you are really my son Esau or not." Do you get the hint that Isaac is a little suspicious of what's happening right now? And part of it is Jacob's fault, because Jacob realizes in this moment that he talks too much, that he said too much. Because a typical response when he goes in and he says, "My father," which is just kind of a greeting as if to say, "Hey, can I request an audience with you?" And Isaac says, "Here I am. Who are you, my son?" The typical response would be, if we translated it into English, would be, "Esau am I." It's just a very kind of passive way of saying, "Hey, it's me." But what does Jacob do? He can't help himself, can he? He feels like he needs to explain himself. "I am Esau, Your firstborn I have done as you told me. Now sit up and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me. And then he says, of course, because the Lord your God granted me success. Jacob is just talking too much. He's over-explaining. Moms and dads, do you ever get suspicious when your kids start over-explaining things? And you go, hey, so what were you guys doing in the backyard? And then this elaborate tale just spills out about all that was going on. And you're going, hang on a second. I'm not sure that that's exactly what was happening out there. And I think it's safe to assume that Rebecca, she's probably behind the scenes, around the corner, listening, and she's thinking to herself, too much, Jacob, pull it back a bit. Jacob realizes that he's talking too much, in part because of all of his compromise faculties that Isaac would have at this point in his life. He still hears. He still goes, there's something different. He's suspicious. So he tells Jacob to come near. So Jacob went near to Isaac, his father, who felt him and said, the voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. Y'all, this seems so absurd, doesn't it? He's feeling goat hair on Jacob's hands. And he's like, it feels like Esau. Feels like him. And he did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him. He doesn't go into the details on the blessing at will in just a minute, but then verse 24, Isaac backs up just one more second. I mean, over and over and over again, there's like this little check, and yet he still moves forward. He said, are you really my son Esau? And he answered, I am. Finally, Jacob gets the clue, right? Don't talk. Just keep it brief. This is the last thing Jacob says here. I am. Then he said, bring it near to me that I may eat of my son's game and bless you. So he brought it near to him, and he ate, and he brought him wine, and he drank, and probably brought him as much wine as he could possibly bring him. Verse 26, then his father Isaac said to him, come near and kiss me, my son. One last moment. So he came near and kissed him, and Isaac smelled the smell of his garments and blessed him and said, see, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth and plenty of grain and wine. Let the peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. Jacob did it. He deceived his father, and he received the blessing. He takes a worldly approach to receive what God had already promised. And he has to deceive his father. And what's sad about this relationship is that Jacob actually has to become someone else, doesn't he? To get the blessing. And he succeeds in it. Jacob deceives Isaac. It's just a tragedy of a family here. But then our fourth scene is this, and we'll look at verses 30 through 35 to see this. God's purposes prevail. God's purposes prevail. Look at how this goes down, starting in verse 30. As soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, when Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, Esau his brother came in from hunting. He also prepared delicious food and brought it to his father. And he said to his father, let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that you may bless me. His father Isaac said to him, who are you? He answered, I am your son, your firstborn Esau. Then Isaac trembled very violently and said, who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? And I ate it all before you came, and I have blessed him. Yes, and he shall be blessed. As soon as Esau heard the words of his father, he cried out with an exceedingly great and bitter cry and said to his father, bless me, even me also, O my father. But he said, your brother came deceitfully, and he has taken away your blessing. I mean, what do you do with this? Esau comes in right after Jacob leaves. And they find out, Isaac and Esau, discover at this point that Jacob has come in deceitfully, that he has stolen the blessing. And this is not just the type of thing that you can go, well, Dad, take it back. Take it back and give it to me. These things are binding. You remember what Isaac said about this, that my soul may bless you. This is coming from the depths of who I am. You don't just reel that back in. And so, Esau is bitter, and he hates his brother. And you find out, if you keep reading, that he plots now against his brother. This is, as soon as my father dies, when the time of grieving is over, I'm going to kill him, and I'm going to take back what he believed was his. But I want you to see also Isaac's response, which is incredibly important because it shows us the prevailing grace of God and that God's purposes prevail, because it tells us in verse 33 that Isaac trembled very violently and said, who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it and I blessed him. And look at what he says. Yes, and he shall be blessed. For the first time in this entire chapter, this is a little glimpse of grace, a little glimpse of redemption, a glimpse of repentance, where Isaac finally recognizes in humility, in trembling, that he said God had promised that Jacob would be the one to be blessed. And I admit defeat. He shall be blessed. He is the one that God had promised a blessing to. Yes, and he shall be blessed. It's the first sensible statement that is made. The first sign of repentance, recognition that God's sovereign purposes can't be thwarted. Isaac finally relents from doing things his way, from trying to subvert God's plan, and he admits defeat. Finally. And we see, do you see this in the midst? This is an awful story. This is terrible what this family does to one another. And yet we see in the midst of this wreckage that a diamond is found, that some sense of spiritual sanity is found, that we see that God's purposes do prevail in this. And so I want us, in the last few minutes of our time, to answer this question: what does this mean for us? What does this mean for us? It means this, first of all, that God keeps his promises. And thank God that he does. And thank God that the fulfillment of God's promises are not dependent on you or me or Isaac and his family, right? Because the promise that he keeps here in this passage is in the midst of and through a dysfunctional family that ultimately finds its fulfillment in the person and work of Jesus. Randy said this a couple of weeks ago. We are people of promise, blessed through faith in Christ. God keeps his promises, and what we see in here, listen, we have to get this. The Bible only presents one true hero, and that true hero is Jesus. All the people that we read about in the Old Testament, even all the people, even in this occasion, where God works through all these people, we see just how imperfect and dysfunctional they are, that they're really not worth emulating all that much. And so the Bible calls us over and over again, Old Testament and New Testament, to look to Christ, look to Jesus. He is the fulfillment of God's promises. The second thing this means for us is that God can bring good from the worst circumstances. If God can carry out his purposes through the scandalous actions of this family, and you see it over and over and over again, not just this family, but families after this, family before this, he does it over and over and over again, then you can trust him to bring good out of your troubles. You can trust him to do that. Don't let your thoughts of God be tainted by what you consider to be his delay in working out the details of your life. Don't consider him ever to be not good. He's always good, even if it's slower than you want. Rest in him. Wait on him. Don't take matters into your own hands, but find your joy and peace in him. If only we could talk some sense into this family that we looked at today, right? To go, his promises will prevail. Only let God do it his way. We see that he can bring good from the worst circumstances. And then finally, we see this, that God's grace is available for the worst of sinners. As dark as this whole scene is, it is not without God's sovereign grace. Because let's ask a question real quick, and it's easy to answer. Does Jacob deserve the blessing? Nope. Nope. He's an awful human being. He does horrible things. Does anybody in this family that we looked at deserve the blessing, though? No. Not based on their actions. And yet God's old promise to Abraham, that in him all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, carries on. It carries on because grace is available to the worst of sinners. And listen, that should be really good news to us because guess what? You know what I know about myself? I'm the worst sinner on the world that I know. And God's grace is available to me. It's available to all of us. And God has made it so that all who will call on him in faith, he will save by his grace. Not because anybody ever deserved it, but because he loves us and he sent his son to die for us. That's good news for us. That is the gospel for us this very morning as we look at this crazy dysfunctional family and how they operated with each other. We see in the midst of that the admission of defeat that God, you win. And he sent his son so that we might be saved. And listen, I'm just going to invite you, anybody in here, if you've never put your trust in Jesus, today is a really good day to do that because grace is available for you. If you have questions about that, I would love to speak with you about that. Maybe somebody invited you here today on this holiday weekend and you're here, you have questions. Talk to the person who you came with. Come talk to me. I don't care, but just get some questions answered about what it means to become a follower of Jesus. And for the rest of us in here, can we just bask in the grace of God that has been poured out on us? Can we do that? I want to pray for us, and we're going to respond in song. And let's respond appropriately to the purposes and promises of God that always prevail and to his grace that has been poured out on us. Let's respond to that. Let me pray first now. Father, we thank you for your grace. We thank you that, Lord, we can look at such a tragic situation in the way that a family would treat each other and see that in and through that you would, for one, lead us to admit defeat, or that we can't do things our way and expect to be right with you. But Lord, would you give us strength that we need to wait on you, to wait on your promises, to wait on your deliverance, and not to take matters into our own hands. And can we just bask in the grace that has been lavished upon us, that we have been blessed in the heavenly realms with every blessing in Christ. Lord, help us now as we respond to your word. And it's in the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.